Welcome back to the SolarPunkPro podcast. I'm James Vanzer, and today I'm going to tell you why hope it isn't naive. It is the most radical position you can take in 2025. The fossil fuel industry, they want you to think that their political wins means the renewable energy transition is over. Climate doomers, they want you to think collapse is inevitable. And lifestyle influencers, they want you to buy land in Montana and learn how to can tomatoes. Guess what? They're all wrong. And I'm going to show you why the data proves we're winning. Why the opposition's desperation, it actually signals their decline, and why your career choice is a more powerful form of protest than any sign you'll ever carry. And if you want to go from soul-crushing corporate work to a career that actually matters, pays well, and actively dismantles the systems destroying our planet, stick around to learn how you too can become part of the 4 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollar a year electrify everything and power it with the renewable energy industry. Now, podcast statistics say that if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you're feeling pretty demoralized right now. Maybe you just read another article about climate tipping points or political setbacks. Maybe you're watching friends retreat into doomism or off-grid fantasies. If that sounds familiar, you're in the right place, because today I'm going to show you the receipts that prove hope isn't delusional. It is the only position supported by the actual data. And I'm going to explain why solar punk is basically what happens when hippies grow up and the punk kids trade their skateboards in for tool belts and safety harnesses. So let's start with the basics. What the hell is solar punk? Why should you care? You've seen the term online, you've probably seen the aesthetic version. Beautiful art showing futuristic cities covered in greenery, solar panels everywhere, people in flowing clothes tending rooftop gardens. It looks like what would happen if a hippie commune merged with a cyberpunk movie. And they're both deciding that they're gonna pay their bills. But you know what? It's not that far off, because solarpunk is basically what happens when the counterculture grows up and figures out how to use the system's own tools against it. Think about the hippies in the 60s and 70s. They said, fuck the man, and went to live in communes, grew organic food, talked about living in harmony with nature. Beautiful ideals, zero economic power. The man didn't even notice they left because they made themselves economically irrelevant. Then think about the punk kids, the ones skateboarding through corporate plazas, spray painting anti-establishment messages, wearing safety pins through their noses. Pure rebellion. Pure, I refuse to participate in your system, man. Also, zero economic power. Hot topic? Turned punk into a fashion statement, and, well, the actual rebellion got pretty neutered. Solar punk is what happens when those impulses grow up and get strategic. It is the hippie ideal of distributed community-based systems, except instead of dropping out, we're building infrastructure that actually gets paid for. It's the punk ethos of fuck the establishment, except instead of spray painting walls, we're installing solar panels that bankrupt utility monopolies while we cash paychecks. Here's what this looks like in practice, and this is where it stops being abstract. Distributed energy systems, not massive centralized power plants owned by oligarchs. Millions of homes, buildings, local, generating their own electricity. We covered this in episode 4. Every rooftop solar system. It is economic warfare against utility companies. That is hippie's dream of decentralized power, except it's literally decentralized power. The double meaning, it is not accidental. You're not asking the utility company for permission to live differently. You're building systems that makes them irrelevant. That, my friends, is way more punk than spray painting their logo with a big red X through it. Resilient communities? We're not talking isolated compounds waiting for collapse. We are talking about interconnected communities that can withstand shocks. Episode 5, we showed how you and your smart appliances can become part of a distributed grid. That is the hippie commune idea, except for instead of sharing goats, we're sharing electrons and grid services while getting paid for it. Economic justice through infrastructure. When we keep energy generation local, wealth stays in communities instead of getting extracted to distant shareholders. That, my friends, that is the hippie cooperative model meeting the punk DIY ethic. Except we're not making zines in someone's basement. We're building multi-million-dollar solar installations that employ local workers at union wages. And here's the part that blows the minds of both the 60s hippies and the 80s punk kids. You can make six figures doing this. Every solar installer putting panels on roofs is making families economically independent from those monopolies while earning $80,000 to $100,000 a year. Every energy storage engineer who's designing those battery systems that is making gas peaker plants obsolete, they are pulling in $110,000 to $180,000 a year. Every community solar developer is keeping wealth local while building a career that cashes $100,000 to $200,000 a year. The hippies, they wanted to build alternative systems, but they couldn't figure out how to pay for them. The punks, they wanted to tear down the establishment, but couldn't figure out what to replace it with. Solarpunk, it figured out both. Build alternative systems that are economically superior to what they replace. The revolution, it pays better than the system you're revolting against. Think about the career transitions we covered in episode 2. Brendan Bell went from legislative assistant to managing $1.8 billion in climate investments. That's not dropping out, that's redirecting $1.8 billion away from fossil fuels and oligarchs while building your career. Dean Solon, he went from automotive manufacturing to building a $2.2 billion solar company. That, my friends, that is the DIY punk ethic. I will build it myself, except scaled to billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. Mary Powell, she went from traditional utility CEO to leading residential solar deployment. That is understanding the system from the inside and using that knowledge to dismantle it while cutting bigger checks than she ever did working for the monopoly. That's Solarpunk. The hippie ideal of better systems meets the punk ethic of fuck the establishment. It meets the grown-up realization that you need economic power to actually change things. You're not asking for permission. You're not waiting for the system to change. You are building systems that work better. They pay better. They make those old systems obsolete. And here's why this matters right now. The establishment, it is freaking out about it, which is how you know it is working. So let's talk about why the fossil fuel industry's political attacks, they do not mean they're winning. They mean they are terrified. You know what the hippies never accomplished? They never made Standard Oil nervous. You know what the punk kids never did? They never threatened Exxon's business model. Solarpunk? Oh, we are making them panic. All right, Christopher Wright, Energy Secretary, who also, used to run Liberty Energy, which made $4.2 billion last year from oil and gas services. The fossil fuel industry, it generates $1.3 billion in profits every single day. They are not attacking renewables because renewables are weak. They are attacking them because we are eating their lunch. When Christopher Wright says covering the entire Earth in solar panels would only power 20% of our needs, a claim that is so mathematically wrong, it's embarrassing. He's not stupid. He's desperate. Because the real number is enough solar panels covering this planet that would power 6,000 Earths. And he knows it. That's not the confident dismissal of a winning industry. That is the flailing propaganda of an industry watching its market share evaporate. Because look what's actually happening. Solar costs, they've dropped 90% in the last decade. Wind capacity, those factors have gone from 25% to over 50%. Battery storage costs, also dropped 90%. Electric vehicles, they have reached cost parity with gas cars. Solar and wind are now cheaper than fossil fuels in every market. Not subsidized cheaper, actually cheaper. That, my friends, that's economics, that's physics. You can't lobby against thermodynamics. The punk kids, they used to spray paint smash the system. Solarpunk figured out something better. Build systems so much cheaper and better, the old system becomes economically irrelevant. You don't need to smash it. You just need to make it obsolete. And you can tell it's working because of how hard they're fighting back. The fossil fuel industry is doing everything it can, capturing regulators, spreading misinformation, trying to lock in their infrastructure before it becomes worthless. Tobacco companies, they did this in the 80s. They captured agencies. They funded bogus science. They attacked researchers. Sound familiar? They still lost because reality, it does not care about political influence. Leaded gasoline, those manufacturers, they fought for decades with massive political power. Guess what? They lost. Asbestos companies fought for 50 years. Guess what? They lost. Same pattern with fossil fuels. The evidence? Overwhelming. The alternatives? Much better. The economics? Yeah, they favor transition. The only question is how long they can delay the inevitable. And here's what the punk kids would love about this. Every political attack creates market opportunities for people smart enough to see them. When they ban direct incentives, distributed energy becomes more valuable because people want independence. When they slow utility scale solar, rooftop systems boom. When they attack federal programs, state and private capital come in and fill the gap. You can't regulate away the fact that solar panels generate electricity. You can't ban the economics of battery storage. You can't legislate against physics. The establishment, they thought they could co-opt the hippie movement by selling organic food at Whole Foods, owned by Amazon. They thought they could defang punk by turning it into a fashion at Hot Topic. But Solarpunk? Oh, we're not asking for organic certification from their agencies or buying Rebellion at their stores. We are building parallel infrastructure that makes their monopolies irrelevant while getting paid better than they pay their own employees. That's why they're panicking, because this time the counterculture figured out how to win. Now, let's talk about the other kind of giving up, the climate doomers who decided it's too late to fight. Here's what doomerism actually is. It's what happens when people can't figure out how to be punk anymore. So they declare everything's fucked, and they retreat. The hippies at least tried to build alternatives, even if they were economically naive. The punks at least created culture and community, even if it didn't change systems. The doomers are just giving up and calling it realism. Communities already experiencing climate impacts, those Pacific Islanders, drought-affected farmers, Gulf Coast residents, they're not giving up. They're adapting and building resilience because they don't have the luxury of despair. Climate science doesn't support binary saved or doomed outcomes. Every fraction of a degree matters. The difference between 2 degrees Celsius and 3, it's hundreds of millions of lives. So acting like these differences don't matter because we can't hit 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's moral bankruptcy. And here's what drives me nuts. Doomerism gives people permission to do nothing while they feel enlightened. I'm not just being realistic about collapse. It is easier than learning how to install heat pumps or design an energy storage system. It's easier than the uncomfortable work of building the solutions. The hippies, they dropped out, but at least they tried to build communes. The punks, they rebelled, but at least they created subcultures. The doomers, they just post about it online about how everything's so hopeless. Meanwhile, people actually building renewable infrastructure, they're making $100,000 to $200,000 a year while creating the tangible, important change. If your response to climate change is buying land and waiting for collapse, you are the least punk thing imaginable. You're not rebelling against the system. You're running away from it. That's not counterculture. That's just quitting. The hippies wanted to change consciousness. The punks wanted to change culture. Solarpunk is changing infrastructure, the future. And infrastructure change is what actually matters. So let's talk about what rebellion actually looks like when you're paying a mortgage and have student loans, or your kids go to daycare. The hippies, they had turn on, tune in, drop out. The punks had destroy what destroys you. Solarpunk has get paid to dismantle their monopolies. Street protests, they matter. They build community. They signal priorities. They give voice. But here's what the hippies learned. Protesting on weekends while working for the system Monday through Friday doesn't change the system. It just makes you feel better about participating in it. The punks figured out you need to refuse participation. But they also learned if you make yourself economically irrelevant, the system doesn't care if you refuse. They'll just ignore you. Solarpunk figured out the actual solution. Work inside the economic system while redirecting resources toward the infrastructure that makes the system obsolete. Start selling out. That's strategy. Every engineer who works for a solar company instead of ExxonMobil is redirecting human capital away from extraction. Every finance professional who moves to climate tech is redirecting financial capital towards solutions. Every project manager who leaves corporate America for grid modernization is building infrastructure that makes fossil fuels obsolete. The hippies, they try to build alternative systems outside the economy. Solarpunk builds alternative systems that are the economy. The punks try to refuse participation. Solarpunk participates so effectively that we are eating their market share. Let me give you an example of the people I've actually worked with. Jason, he went from enterprise rent-a-car management to global director of sales for e-mobility charging software. working with multinationals to electrify their fleets. He didn't drop out of corporate America. He redirected corporate America's vehicle fleets away from fossil fuels while doubling his salary. That's more radical than anything the hippies accomplished with their communes and more effective than anything the punks did with their Zines. Christina, she went from school superintendent and feeling dissuaded because of the politics to designing solar arrays for those schools. Her career change means schools are saving hundreds of thousands on electricity while going solar. That is money that then stays in education instead of going out to those utilities. She didn't refuse to participate in the system. She hacked the system so it funds clean energy instead of fossil fuels. Here's what modern rebellion looks like. Energy storage engineers who are making $110,000 to $180,000 a year building technology that makes 24/7 renewables possible, obsoleting the baseload argument for fossil fuels. They're not debating the industry. They're making the industry's arguments irrelevant. That's punk. Community solar developers, $100,000 to $200,000 a year, creating systems that keep wealth local instead of extracting it to Wall Street. They're not protesting wealth extraction. They're building infrastructure that prevents it. That's punk. Every one of these careers pays living wages or better. Everyone undermines fossil fuel business models. Everyone builds infrastructure that we actually need. The hippies, they wanted to build alternative systems but couldn't figure out how to make them economically viable. The punks, they wanted to tear down the establishment but couldn't figure out what to replace it with. Solarpunk does both. We build economically superior alternatives while getting paid better than the system we're replacing. And here's the beautiful irony. The skills you learned working for the system are exactly what you need to dismantle it. Your project management experience, that's what renewable energy projects need. Your technical sales background, that's what solar companies are hiring for. Your IT knowledge, that is what energy management platforms desperately need. The systems trained you. Now use those skills against it while cashing bigger checks than they were paying you. The hippies said drop out. The punk said burn it down. Solarpunk says take their training, take their capital, take their talent, and redirect all of it toward building systems that make them obsolete. Get paid extremely well while doing it. That's not compromise, that's jujitsu. And here's the evidence that it's working. In the last decade, solar costs 90%. Battery costs drop 90%. Wind efficiency double. EVs reached cost parity. None of this happened because of government mandates. It happened because thousands of engineers, project managers, and financiers chose careers making renewables better and cheaper. Private clean energy investment, it exceeded fossil fuel investment for the first time in 2023. And since then, the gap, it's widening. Global renewable employment is over 13 million jobs and is growing 5 to 10% every single year. The hippies, they tried to create alternative systems. Most failed. The ones that survived became niche markets that, well, didn't threaten much. The punks, they tried to create alternative culture. It got commodified and sold back to them at urban outfitters. Solarpunk? Oh, we're not creating alternative systems, we're creating replacement systems. We're not building counterculture, we're building counter infrastructure. You can't commodify infrastructure. You can't co-opt a solar panel. You can't defang a battery system. The revolution, it isn't happening at protests. It's happening on rooftops and garages, on job sites and engineering firms, at construction projects. The revolutionaries, they aren't wearing tie-dyes. Well, not all the time. Or safety pins. Well, not all the time. They're wearing hard hats and high-vis vests. They're pulling in $80,000 to $200,000 a year. They're getting benefits in 401ks while systematically bankrupting those fossil fuel monopolies. We're the hippies who grew up and learned economics. We're the punks who traded skateboards for tool belts. We're building the future while the establishment panics because they finally figured out we're not asking for permission. We're building the systems that make permission relevant. We're getting paid extremely well to do it. So, here's what I want you to take away. The hippies, they had the right idea about building alternative systems. They just couldn't figure out how to make them economically viable. The punks, they had the right attitude about refusing to participate in corrupt systems. They just couldn't figure out what to build instead. Solarpunk, they figured out both. Build economically superior alternatives that make corrupt systems obsolete. Get paid better than the system pays you while you dismantle it. That's not selling out. That, my friends, that is winning. Hope is not naive. It's the only position supported by the data. The fossil fuel industry, it is dying. Their desperate attacks prove it. The renewable energy transition is accelerating. The economics prove it. People building the future, they're getting paid good salaries to do the work that actually matters. You don't need to drop out. You don't need to burn it down. You don't need to choose between economic security and meaningful rebellion. You need to position yourself where individual opportunity and systematic change, they align. Where you can say, fuck the establishment, while depositing paychecks that they can't match. So here's what to do next. Take the, are you burned out or are you just lazy quiz? It's free, 3 minutes, because maybe what you're feeling is an exhaustion from working too hard. Maybe it's your soul dying from working on things that don't matter. Click this QR code and you'll get that quiz. Or book a free 30-minute industry analysis call. I'll map out the companies, the incentive programs, the career paths in your specific region, completely free, because the faster we get talented people like you into this industry, the faster we build the infrastructure that makes fossil fuels obsolete. You can check out our 100 careers that will power the future. This is a guide to 100 roles with salary ranges from $50,000 to $500,000 each year, organized by skills you already have. Links are in the show notes. Click the QR code, find SolarPunkPro on Instagram and LinkedIn. And remember, the hippies, they tried to build alternative consciousness. The punks tried to build alternative culture. Solarpunk is building alternative infrastructure, and infrastructure is what actually changed the world. So 3 years from now, you'll either be part of building the system that bankrupted those monopolies while you cash six-figure checks, or you'll still be wondering, what if? The revolution isn't asking for your permission to start. It's asking if you want to get paid to participate. I'm James Manzer. This has been the Solarpunk Pro podcast, and I'll see you next week when we dive into the hidden economics of heat pumps and why your HVAC contractor is probably lying to you about why they don't install them.